Ji ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji ki Fateh. So, what you're going to get today is not a polished presentation at all. It's a very raw understanding of something that I'm still coming to understanding of. And I'm so glad that we heard Jasiji's exegesis of Antanasifti Karna Antaparty, because I was sitting there, and as I was sitting there, I was struggling with that, and I was struggling with my thoughts here. So we're going to get something very raw, but hopefully there'll be a lot of opportunity for back and forth between us. And you're going to get the nutty professor aspect of the professor today, because I'm still struggling with this stuff. I'm talking about Sikh peacemaking, and I'm wrestling a lot with, I'm going to teach Sikhi this semester. I teach it every year. I'm blessed that I'm at a really excellent institution, though it's Christian. They want me to teach my tradition every year, and the students love it. They love learning about Baba Nanak, and they love learning about our faith. But I'm teaching it in 2014, and it's the 30th anniversary of a very traumatic year. And so I have to struggle with, okay, but how does that apply, right? The ethical question. And so I'm also struggling with recent events of hate crimes and living in America as a Sikh and what that looks like. And so those two things together, I'm thinking about peace as well. So today I'm going to try to make the case for peace from a Sikh perspective. We could do the same thing for war. And in fact, I think the logical thinking process is the exact same. But just the answer at the end is one or the other. And we have a lot of resources at our disposal. So first, what I'm going to do in my talk is I'm going to go through some of the key elements for Sikh peacemaking, I think some of the key concepts. And then I'll go back and talk about how my friend Rahuldeep Singh, who's a professor in New York, who just a month ago was brutalized in a hate crime in Harlem, in Manhattan, where he lives. I want to put him forward as an example of a case study of, can we use this for Sikh peacemaking? I think so. I think his response is an excellent response, and I want to use that to get us going in terms of discussion. So my thesis is that Prabjot's plight and his response offers a lot to think about and learn from as we think how to live in this diaspora and how to be Sikh Americans. Another inspiration for this talk was Sangeeta Luthra, who I wish she could come today, but I think she's busy. When we were at the conference, she gave an excellent talk on Sikh peacemaking. And so I was wrestling with that. I'm wrestling. A week after that, Prabjot's incident happened, and so this is all very fresh for me and all very raw. Another thesis of mine is that we have a lot of options at our disposal as Sikhs, a lot more than we think. There's a lot of tools in the toolbox and a lot of weapons in the shed. I just gave a similar talk on Ahimsa Day at a Jain Studies conference in Southern California, and you could imagine that that context is very different than this context. I hope that you will be less polite than they were, because you don't believe in ahimsa as much, and I hope we can have that back and forth. It's really important to me. So, yes, please.
The word hinsa comes in Gurbani many places.
Yeah.
It's a very negative thing.
Yeah.
There is a lot in favor of ahimsa.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Limited to all sectors.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I want to get at in this talk as well, is what is it hinsa and what is ahimsa, and where is the boundary, or is there a boundary? And I don't think the boundary is that simple. One alternative to peace is more peace. It doesn't have to be war, right? It can be better peace. It can be just peace. Justice. And justice is the first principle that I'd like to start with, that Baba Nanak talks about, niya and nyao and adl. Let me just read you a few quotes from Gurbani, and I draw mostly from Baba Nanak. Raja nyao kare hat hoye, kahe khudai na manne koe. So he's offering a descriptive analysis here of the king today is only administering nyao if his hand is greased, if his palm is greased, right? So nyao has become an option for royalty, for the administration, for whatever. He also says, in terms of violence, right? When he's talking about in Babar Bani, Jis sakta sakte ko mare, right? Taman rosna hui. And that's a Rahau party, so that's a very important line there. So he's saying, look, if two people of equal ability are going at it, well, who cares? But the problem of the other side of justice is injustice, right? When you don't have equality there, then what is going on here?
Then you have to rebel, right?
Well,
Peaceful revolution.
so Guru Nanak, so I think one thing is that also, if we look at Antanasiftik and Ant, in the larger scheme of things, there's a divine justice. God is administrating justice. God is administrating adl. This universe is ultimately just. Guru Nanak's message is ultimately hopeful in that sense. So he says, Sache Sacha Neho Sache Laya. And Neho here is love. So God loves. So love and justice, I think love is a form of justice. Right? I'm a director for the Center for Equality and Justice at my university. And I think a lot about what is justice. I think love is justice. Seeing somebody else in yourself, seeing yourself in somebody else, that's love. That's justice. That's the condition, that's the intellectual foundation for justice. So this is God's justice. Sache, sacha neho, sache laya, ape kare nyao, jo tis bhaya. He himself administers justice, or God's self, to be gender free, administers justice and pleases as it pleases God's will. Jo tis bhaya. And then there's also an internal justice. He talks about, the bride, we are the bride. Kar ayede sajna ta tan kari sarsi ram. Har mohdi sach shabad thakur dekh rahen si ram. Gun sang rahen si khari sarsi. Ja ravi rang rate avgun mar guni kar chhaya pure purkh bidate. This goes back to the hinsa. Internal hinsa, last line. Taskar mar vasi panchayan. Adal kare vichare. She, the human being on the inside, rules justly, rules over herself with adal. So there's this cosmic justice, and then there's this internal justice. In between is the social injustice. That's the problem. That's where the problem begins and ends, right? That's the realm at which we have to consider, well, what does it look like? So just the first concept, I think, to understand Sikh peacemaking or Sikh war making is justice. Niyat, adal. Second concept, pat. You can also talk about marn. You can talk about other forms of honor. I have never seen Baba Nanak use izzat. It's very interesting to me. Because izzat is socially derived. Pat comes from Akal Purkh. It's God-given dignity. Right? And he also talks about it in terms of Sache te pavana bhaya pavana te jal hoi. So he's talking about the creation of the world, the universe. Jal te tribhavan sajya kat kat jot samoi. And talking about the creation of beings, talking about the creation of individuals, God is putting a light inside all of them. Nirmal mela na thiye sabdrate pat hoi. The Immaculate Lord does not become polluted. Attuned to the sabad, we can obtain pat, we can obtain honor. So just like God created the wind, God created fire, God created Shabad, and then Shabad is pat. Pat is inherent in creation. That's a radical concept to me. That's an amazing concept to me. That pat, niya, justice, and dignity are inherent in the creation. Jinna satgur ras mile se pure purkh sajan gur mil bhau jal langiye darge pat parwan nanak te mukh ujle tun upje sabd nishan. The dargah, the court, the diban, where we are going to go at the end of this life, is a court of justice. Our ethical actions are going to be weighed on a scale, and that's a court of administering justice. God is marne marnyada. for the poor in the world, right? For the downtrodden in the world. We have to think, we're sitting here on a hill in the Bay Area overlooking Silicon Valley. Is this conversation going to be different if we sit in the bus station area in San Jose? As Sikhs, we have a responsibility to check ourselves. If we're sitting in a beautiful multi-million-dollar gurdwara, it's a beautiful gurdwara, no, nothing wrong with it, it's beautiful. But is our conversation going to be the same here and there? Is our conversation going to be the same here and in Northwest Frontier Province? Is the conversation going to be the same here when drones are being falling over little children's heads? Is the conversation going to be here in a leper colony? In a widow colony? We know about that.
So here is an antithesis to that.
Yeah.
Which is that, in politics, the conversations are different, depending on who the audience is. But in the spiritual realm, it isn't.
And that's the Sikh revolution, is that this gap between the spiritual realm and the political realm needs to be smashed. Not one needs to bleed into the other. It needs to be smashed.
Yeah, it's bridged, though.
The political realm as it is needs total reversal. Right?
Spirituality has, like Guru Gobind Singh has said, Raj bina nahi dharam chale hai, dharam bina sab gale dale hai.
There's a justice to it. There's a justice inside of us. There's a justice in the universe. We have to bridge the difference in the social realm.
And this what you said, it depends how you punctuate. Different meaning.
Yeah.
Raj bina, if you punctuate here, Raj bina, na dharam chale hain. But if you punctuate Raj, comma, na dharam chale hain. Without dharam, Raj nahi chal sakta. That's the way Harmandir Sahib is.
Darbar Sahib. Darbar Sahib. I need to use the word Darbar Sahib because it's central to my thesis that this is the Diban here on this world.
Yes, and there is no victory slogan.
It's not a mandir, right? It's not Harida Mandir. It's Harida Darbar. There's a big difference, and I think we need to change our language there. I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm here to shake things up a little.
But Rahuldeep, the thing is, the mandir has to be the darbar, and the darbar has to be the mandir.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it isn't that you have to change it. These words are, they have to be combined. The energy of the darbar has to be imbued in the mandir and vice versa.
Right now we're in an 80-20 situation where 80% of the time we use the term Harmandir Sahib and 20% we use maybe Darbar Sahib. Let's get to 50-50. If to get to 50-50 I have to say what I have to say, that's fine with me. But I think you're right.
No, it has to be like that.
I totally agree with you. But in how...
The point, I guess, is a spiritual basis for social justice.
Ethics. It's ethics. You can call it social justice, you can call it whatever. Guru Nanak calls it Niya.
And that's why in the darbar and in the mandir, right, which is one, right there, the politics is on the side.
It's not even on the side. Amno Samaniya. And it's looking to Delhi. There's Sangeeta ji.
We just remembered you.
We just remembered you, Sangeeta ji. We were talking about Sikh peacemaking, and I was talking about how inspired I was by your talk. And so,
emphasis on justice. Where does non-judgment come in?
we'll get to that. I promise you. Nai maniya pat upajya lahi sach soot darge andar paiye tag na tute saput. We can talk about what that means in a second. But let's talk about hukum. If we're talking about non-judgment. The hukum is going on no matter what we do. Now hukum alone, I think, is to intellectually, we were talking about intellectual understanding earlier. To understand just the concept of hukum is only half the story. Wherever hukum comes in is automatically overturning Homeh. And my brother Pajneet Singh at a Khalsa Care Foundation in LA, we were having a back and forth, and he said, I got it. I'm going to put it on a t-shirt. It's my way or it's God's way. And I said, that's good. That's great. Right? Wherever there's God's way, it's overturning my way.
That's why on the cross, if you request God, please take my thoughts away. because I do not know where the thoughts come from. But with your blessing, if you replace them with your thoughts, I know they'll be clean, successful, and comfortable.
Thoughts are the problem.
Because if that happens,
But this is why I agree with the earlier point, and I would like to flip the earlier point about agnosticism. Agnosticism isn't wrong. Agnosticism is absolutely right. We should all be agnostics.
Yeah.
Right? Because who are we to say we know what God is? We don't.
So it's
Right?
like
How dare anybody get on a stage and tell us, let me tell you about God?
See, but the thing is,
Guru Nanak says he doesn't know about God.
what they are saying is like, of course you don't know.
Yeah.
Nobody knows. Who claims to know?
Right.
What is norm
So this is so we were talking about antana sifti kehna ant antana karne dena ant. At the end of that we have nam. Fundamental, but it's not the end in itself. If we end with antana sifti kehna ant antana karne dena ant, we didn't need Sikh tradition. We didn't need the Sikh movement. Upanishad said that before. Sufis said that before. Everything is mystical. Close your eyes, have a good time, bliss out. Wonderful. We didn't need the Sikh movement if that was the end. Nam is the beginning of Sikh life. Is the entry point.
How can you believe
It's the beginning and the end because hukam needs to be bridged. Niya needs to be bridged. There's a niya to the universe. There's a justice to the universe.
Now,
And it needs to be bridged in this world.
so now, it depends what you think of now. I mean, it is all inclusive. It is comprehensive because it's the essence. So you can't just say it's the beginning or it's the end. So Nam is the essence.
I'm not making an ontological or metaphysical statement here. I'm making an ethical statement here. I'm talking about Sikh ethics. If you treat ethically, if you wake up in the morning and all you want to do is Nam, God bless you.
Yeah, I know that.
But do something about it. Because Guru Nanak, otherwise there would be no Siddh Gosht.
Right.
There would be no back and forth.
No, there would be no activism.
There'd be nothing.
No bringing it into life.
And-
So Nam is not just repeating the name.
Right.
Because Taoists do that.
Right.
Right? Sahib has said that.
Right.
No, but I thought that is the way to get God's grace. If you are not, how are you going to get the grace if you are not going to use the norm?
If you can get the grace, if you can get the grace and not have to worry about, bombs flying over your head or somebody entering your holiest of holy shrines with their shoes and their guns and their tanks.
Right.
If you can get that grace and be happy with it, God bless you.
This is God's grace in spite of God.
Well, this is the challenge, right? This is the challenge, and I think
That's where
understanding hukam over homma is the key there.
but then you also bow yourself as a man that's up to a bar from that poet.
Sure. Sure.
But then we also saying, Sufi Saji says about God, His presence, His existence. So yes, none of us may be able to understand and explain it. But Baba, you said you have to understand, to be in that space. If you completely say that He doesn't exist, then that's really not a right door for us to feel. So we need to kind of make a statement consistently in one direction. Yes, Guruji may have said, but I think he was connecting us all to God. Therefore, because there is something there, he's connecting to some place that we, beyond our normal comprehension of physical presence.
And that's what I mean by the beginning of Sikh life. Because ethically, then you've got to do something with it.
Yeah, but if you remember him, if you remember him through Nam, with his blessing, then you, with his blessing, will be able to reach wherever you want to reach. Because we don't know where we need to reach. That's
So-
all.
You showed us very clearly that in the name of hukam, we don't accept injustice. We don't say it's all God's hukam, it's okay, I'm just going to go to the jungle and pray. Instead, if you see injustice and you know it's injustice, then without homin, you still have to be willing to fight.
you have to do that.
But if I do it in the spirit of, without homin getting in the way, without hatred getting in the way, there's a divine command that we have to do. Our own sense of justice comes from ourselves. You have to be willing to do something.
Because I think this idea is all telling you what's right and wrong anyway.
I want to be honest, I don't understand. Because what is divine command? tell me what is the divine command of today.
See, it's not the command.
And who knows it? Is it the Ayatollah in
Absolutely.
Ayatollah in
You know what? Maybe let me just go through the final two concepts. Then I want to take you through Prabjot's example, and I want to show you how he flips the whole thing.
No, because the only thing I brought up is because it is somewhat of a medieval concept, and I'm not saying it's medieval in the sense of that's not global or high enough. The difficulty is we don't understand it.
So let me bring you. Let me bring you a contemporary example, and you tell me if you don't understand it still.
Can we stay with Harmandir Sahib for a bit more? We talked about the attack, let's go into it. So there was a cause and effect. There was a cause and effect to that, right? And yes, ultimately you accept everything that took us. But the point is you cannot take away from, you just cannot shove off Vindawala's responsibility of bringing arms to Harmandir, to the most sacrosanct place. Hello, how can you do that? What is the excuse? It doesn't matter what the excuse is. You brought arms there when there's not even supposed to be a Jakarta. There's no victory slogan allowed in Harmandir. You dare to bring arms there?
That is big sacrilege.
Yes. So, who is the one? It doesn't matter whether you were set up, or you were naive, or you were trusting, or whatever. But when you talk about Harmandir Sahib and what happened there, who brought the arms there? Who made it an arsenal?
I've been listening to.
There are many sides to that one, and I think we don't want to get sidetracked too much into.
We don't.
No. We do want to get sidetracked. We do want to get sidetracked. Let me just finish and then let us get sidetracked. No, it's absolutely important. I've been listening to a lot of Prindramana lately, and I would disagree with you politely, and I'll tell you why.
Yes, I would love to hear.
Okay. Because of Sarvadapala. Okay? The core Sikh principle of Sikh ethics is the unity of all people under one deity who is called by many names but is beyond being named. That is why we pray daily for the well-being of all humanity, Sarvadapala. Ultimately, the world is a good world. Good people who act with good principles embody divine justice. Brings us back to Niyan Adha. That is why, after hate shooter Wade Michael Page killed himself after shooting up a Gurdwara in Wisconsin last year, 6 survivors prayed for his soul at the memorial service. The statement they made was that we may all be lost souls, but we are all souls that belong to a God. And the last two things is about words alone aren't going to get us there, right? Gyan galni dhundi. So between Parupkari and Karni, this is the end of it. This is where we're going. I call it engagement. And when I came last time at the conference, I was talking about the flip of Gurdwara. This is exactly what I was talking about. I said we have to engage. Such ਜਾਣੀਏ ਜੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਸੱਚੀ ਲੈ ਦਇਆ ਜਾਣੇ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਕਿਛ ਪੁੰਨ ਦਾਨ. Right? That person is true who is receiving some instruction, is engaging with compassion, embodying compassion, daya, and doing some pundan, doing something with that instruction. That's the true person. Guru Nanak talks about vidya vicharinta parupakari. I call it benevolence. And Bhai Gurdas talks a lot about this, and I can tell you how exciting and radical Bhai Gurdas's vision of Parupkari is. But let me just read you so many statements on Parupkari from Guru Ramdas and Guru Arjan. Oi Purkh Purani Tan Jan Rehi Upadesh Karyo Parupkariya. Guru Arjan says, Prabhu ko simre se Parupkari. And Guru Arjan not just is saying Parupkari Bano, he, I think, maybe dies for Parupkari. Because building wells and building, caravanserais or whatever, and being engaged in the world is the act of a king. And understanding that your house is that darbar gets him in the ire of the Mughal. The Mughal king. So he's doing Parupkari, doing it for Akal Purakh. That gets him in trouble, and this is why he has to be martyred. So now let's go to Prabjot's example, and we'll talk about everything that we just talked about, right? So it's been a month now. So a few weeks ago, on a Sunday afternoon, I received some horrible news that no friend wants to hear. My college friend and fellow Sikh activist father, Rahuldeep Singh, had been hospitalized after being roughed up quite badly in a hate crime in Manhattan, New York. He suffered blows, cuts, bruises, and a broken jaw, while also being verbally attacked by a group of youths on bikes. They called him Osama, they called him terrorist, and they called out to each other, "Let's get him." So Prabjot in this press conference, maybe 48 hours after the attack, his jaw is wired, he's healing really quickly with God's grace, but still healing when he's giving this press conference. He has a baby at home, he has a wife. In a press conference after the attack, he spoke, first of all, of gratitude. He said that he had been the recipient of extreme kindness and compassion. Strangers on the street came to his aid. He received medical attention at the very hospital where he practices as a physician. His friends rallied around him. The New York Police Department treated his case with extreme diligence. So maybe this is one aspect of NIA. Authorities acted justly, with justice for all at their fore. So that's a good thing. But then we also, now this goes back to 1984, and this goes back to the Varsa. We need to acknowledge that the issue of sovereignty, along with India's uneven relationships with religious minorities, were at the center of so much violence in and around Punjab at the end of the last century. So when we speak about Sikh nonviolence and peacemaking, it's not just Sikhs who are responsible for it, but we have to hold others accountable for that as well. Prabjot did something different here. He sought justice for himself, but first he sought justice for others. Justice for ourselves and justice for others. We can't settle on one without the other. Either one won't make sense without the other.
How did he seek justice for others?
So when some folks were shocked to see that in this press conference, in the media interview after the attack, Prabjot issued an open invitation to his attackers to ask questions about our common Sikh faith, to meet him at a Sikh place of worship or Gurdwara to understand the Sikh religion. He said that only if we welcome these misguided youths to engage with us can we really try to make sure they have an opportunity to learn from such misguided acts. Merely holding them accountable in the criminal justice system, which we know is flawed, would fall short of improving these youths' lives so that they are better people as a result of their mistake, he called it. He's beaten, his jaw is broken, and he says they made a mistake. Even though they attacked Prabjot, in the true spirit of Sikhi, he wants them to become better people. They should take responsibility for their actions, but they should also remedy their poor judgment and ignorance.
But see, I have a problem with poor judgment and mistake, because what he's really saying is that they thought he was somebody different.
Absolutely not. I talked to Prabjot yesterday. We absolutely talked about this, and that is not what he's saying at all.
I mean, that's what it seems to me.
No. You're totally not correct. I talked to him yesterday, and I mean the issue of misguided, mistaken identity is he's so far beyond it.
Okay.
That issue.
This is what it.
No.
Okay. So mistake, attacking somebody else is a mistake. It's not a mistake.
So he lives in that neighborhood.
No. Wait.
Right? He knows those. He knows who these kids are. He knows their mothers. He works with them. And he says they can be better people.
That's true.
We need them to be better people. I can't just throw them in jail. This is, I think, a long-term response to justice. He didn't have to respond as he did. Had he brandished his kirpan, which he was wearing to save his skin, hardly any of us in this room would have objected to that. Nobody in us in this room would have said, Prabjot, you're wrong.
I think that's wrong.
You're right, because it could have been much worse, right?
I don't think you wear kirpan for perfection. You wear kirpan for religiously.
Okay, kirpan or not kirpan, if now people are saying...
It's a weapon.
I don't know, but I mean, my understanding was from all the sources that I hear, I generally hear,
It has become like a religious symbol.
So this is another conversation that's going on. He should have we should all now have pistols with us.
Yes.
People are saying that, you're saying that. Okay, let's all have AK-47s with us. But here's the thing.
That's what Guru intended, I would say.
ਗਿਆਨ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਢੂੰਢੀ ਹੈ
Throwing in jail, getting punished, she's focusing more on the deeper issue.
Yeah,
Can we
that
have
is
compassion even
true.
towards them?
That's forgiveness, that's
The
compassion.
mistake part, what he's saying, mistake, I think that's where she's objecting,
Yeah.
and
It's, okay,
what is the
I'm
mistake?
objecting to,
So
yeah,
what
I know.
mistake did
You
you
know,
make?
okay, so first of all, I'm not faulting Prof. Jyot because what he did was heroic.
Yeah.
Let me say that. It's very hard to have that level of compassion and not have anger and not have revenge and not have all of that. However, mistake from both counts, whether it was mistaken identity, there was a mistake, or attacking him was a mistake. I think mistake is it's a word that doesn't quite express what they did. It's the complete mindset of violence, of attacking those who are different. It's not a mistake. It's something lacking in their education.
but that's his opinion, right? He made the statement, it's a mistake.
That's fine. I'm just for our discussion over here, I'm just saying that I wouldn't qualify.
What would you say instead?
I think there's a huge deficiency in their thinking, in their.
I think that we have to remember that Joe chose to live in Ireland with his family. And he did that way before this attack happened. He's been living here. He said, I will not move out of
Yeah,
Ireland.
he said he would not.
And we have to understand why is he doing this? Because he is imbued in, he's taking
In making
his
changes,
skills in order to improve a community. And I think this connects to the concept of Nam and these kind of broader issues, because what Prabjot the reason why Prabjot is able to calmly respond to this is because he knows those people. These are mostly poor minority people who we often associate with violence and crime, and he knows them well enough to not immediately call them just violent by nature. I mean, I think it's really important to understand that that's his Nam. He's embarked on a vision,
That's beautiful.
on a journey to know these people
And to change
and to
them.
serve them. No, not to change them, to serve them. I think there's a big difference. He sees,
But to serve them to what end? To change that mindset
well,
of
to give
attacking.
them a better quality
So-
of life, better help in the hope that they will live better lives.
So that is change.
Yeah,
That is
that's
change.
fine.
You serve to change. You serve to
Right.
give, right?
Right.
So ultimately you are affecting a change in the environment for the positive. And that's what he's doing. And that's beautiful. I'm just saying that I wouldn't call it a mistake. And maybe it's just...
Let me put it this way. If our child went out and it was with a group of friends and they were riding in a car, having fun with their friends, and they just got worked up and did something foolish. Say they hit somebody with the car. They were goofing off, they were listening to music, they accidentally hit someone with a car.
Accidentally.
No, but the point is that they need to take responsibility for the fact that they did not behave the way they should have been in the car. We would give them the benefit of the doubt. Why? Because they're children. What Prabjot is responding to is a history in this country in which minorities, particularly African Americans, people of color who live in urban areas, are kind of treated like adults, regardless of how old they are, for the same acts that they do. And I really believe that. I believe that the reason why he calls it a mistake is because he's saying, look, these are still kids, and I recognize that they're kids. What they did was horrible,
So he's using
but
the
they
word
are not
fully
horrible. That is what he's trying to say. And I think that,
Okay.
to me, this is connected to what Rahuldeep is talking about. What does Nam mean? Why does he say beginning of something? I think that Hindus believe in exploration. And I think Nam was this. By injustice, by talking about the inability to define Nam, to me anyway, what they are saying is, you have to go on your journey of exploration to find it. And this is his way of doing that. Is to stay in a community, where he's not a part of the community, where he's an outsider, to force himself to explore and learn about something that's very different from, and he does it very self-consciously. I mean,
I'll tell you, Sunita, I'm holding this cup and I drop it. That's an accident. It could be a mistake. This is so huge, and I see what you're saying. I get what you're saying. It's amazing, if that's what it's the largeness of it all. To see this as a mistake in that context. I mean, wow, that's trivializing what it is, and that's fine.
well, he's
But-
not the only one.
Sangeeta, I think one more point was mentioned beautifully. Even if he did not know this kid,
Yeah.
I think even if it's stranger, he would have still the same statement.
Yeah. Right. I agree
Because
with
he's
you.
a much different way.
Well, just the fact that he's living in this community. He has a degree in medicine. His wife has a degree in medicine. How many people give up the opportunity to make lots of money somewhere else? I mean, I think his reaction is really part of a broader life choice that he's made, and that we really need to understand it in that. I don't know him myself, but I also want to add that this is not that he's kind of fusing. He's creating a bridge between an earlier American tradition, the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King, and all of these people, and he's taking an element of Sikhi and saying, hey, there's a real parallel between what I want to do and even the language that he chose.
And let me give you some language from Baba. Huh? Jit seviya sukh paiye so sahib sada samaliye. Jit kita paiye apna sa kaal buri kyun kaliye. Manda moor na kichai de lammi nadar nihaliye. ਜਿਉ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨਾਲ ਨਾ ਹਾਰੀਏ ਤੇ ਵੇਹਾ ਪਾਸਾ ਢਾਲੀਏ ਕਿਛ ਲਾਹੇ ਉੱਪਰ ਘਾਲੀਏ. Now, I have a wife. I have a son. I would never blame Prabjot if he said, you know what, I have to carry a pistol now. I mean, at some level, I get it. But de lammi nazar. Pistol rakh lo. ਕਿੰਨੇ ਕੁ ਬੰਦਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਸ਼ੂਟ ਕਰ ਲਓਗੇ? ਕਿੱਥੇ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚ ਜੇਗੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਬੁਲਟ? If the Sikh Qaum is a Sikh revolution, then it has a responsibility to revolve and evolve everything and ourselves. And create something better. That's my point here. You can carry a gun. You can carry an AK-47. You're right. Is much better. And there's some situations in which that works. And we can talk about Janelle Singh.
And that is why my objection to weapons of destruction in Harmandir.
But with Harmandir, I listened to Janelle Singh recently, and he feels he's standing up for honor, and he's standing up for man, and he thinks he's standing up for izzat of the Sikh people, Sikh women, Sikh children, Sikh brothers, sisters, mothers. Hanji?
Did you hear him in English or Punjabi?
He doesn't speak English. I heard him in Punjabi. He didn't speak English.
The guy lives in the 21st century and doesn't speak English.
Do you know, he lived in the 20th century, do you know his depth of knowledge of the leader of Damdami Taksal of Gurbani? No, I don't want to make fun of that. I don't want to trivialize. That's not a joke.
No, that's irrelevant.
That's not a joke. His depth of knowledge of Gurbani is Damdami Taksal head. There's a reason they call him Sant Janal Singh. I don't call him Sant, whatever, but people do, and he knew what he was talking about. So English or no English, it doesn't matter.
Language. One thing I would like to bring up.
Please.
It's very hard for me living here to understand what he's talking about. But when we look at Bhai Kanhaiyaji, where he reached, okay, once we look at that, then we can see probably he's getting very close to where Bhai Kanhaiyaji is. When we look at this will then protect us.
And let's go back to Guru Arjan. I mean, if the guy knows, and Guru Tegh Bahadur knows that his father went through this, and they're running around North India collecting funds, and they're running around North India spreading Sikh message. Fearlessness. His name is Tegh Bahadur. Let's not forget who we're talking about here. He sees himself as a king. He sees himself as God's sovereign on earth, God's viceroy, if you will. And I think we forget that I said it last night, we're a Akal Purakh di Fauj. We're not a Fauj just for self-protection. We're a Fauj for Parupkari. And ਜਿੱਥੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਕੱਲ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਤੇਗ ਦੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਮੰਗੀਏ, ਉਹ ਦੇਗ ਦੇ ਫਤਿਹ ਦੀ ਖਾਤਰ ਮੰਗੀਏ. Deg, Teg, Fateh is the same thing as Parupkari. Don't ever forget that. This movement, this Sikhi is so radical. Asi inu ek precious ji cheez samb ke side te rakhi hoyi hai. Bhai Gurdas says, after, and this is my thesis in my dissertation in my forthcoming book, Bhai Gurdas is writing after Guru Arjan's martyrdom. And he's saying, Sikhs need to become a forest of Parupkari, banyan trees, cooling this hot world, because this world is burning. Right? And what Prabjot did is he became a tree for Parupkari. He didn't let the flame touch him. And you can say he should have kept an AK-47, and people are. There's a Facebook group saying, let's arm ourselves. Fine. ਕਿੱਥੇ ਤੱਕ ਉਹ ਗੱਲ ਲੈ ਜਾਓਗੇ? ਤੁਸੀਂ 25 ਮਿਲੀਅਨ ਲੋਕ ਹੈਗੇ ਹੋ, 1 ਬਿਲੀਅਨ ਮੁਸਲਿਮ ਨੇ, 1 ਬਿਲੀਅਨ ਕ੍ਰਿਸਚੀਅਨ ਨੇ, ਕੀ ਕਰ ਲਓਗੇ?
I think the bigger issue is that in the modern society, anything other than social justice and social intercourse and peace, there is no other choice. In the United States, there is no choice. It's very strange to hear that Teg is a choice here. Right? It is not a choice. Teg was a choice 500 years ago. And it is an aspect of it that Sikhi is very important. It also has to do with the lives.
Right, and this is where Hukam and Home come in. And this is where discernment, the Hukam and Home, this is why you need a spiritual path. You need to know what the heck is going on. And it's very difficult path to walk. I couldn't do it either, Uncle Ji. I couldn't do it either. Bada garam sabha hai sada. And he's a sant, he's a sipahi. His weapons are community health. He's bringing community health from global perspectives to Harlem, to poorest parts of America. We're going to need that. If you're going to give health care to everybody, you're going to need healthcare workers to deliver that health care. And if Sikhs are the face of that, could you imagine what we could do? Could you imagine if we were the face of interfaith? This is how this is Sawa Lakh se ek ladao. This is how to do it. It's done here, it's done here. That's my thesis.
But I think let's get information more than the fun. I think the much stronger because he knows the protection is somewhere else.
I talked to him last night. I swear to God, I talked to him. I asked him, I said, I didn't want to ask him. I said, because it's kind of insulting, right? He said, could you imagine what would have happened if I had done that? What would the media strategy have been then if I had done that?
Much worse. Things all over the world.
Now, I Google myself once in a while, right? Because my wife made me a lovely website and I Google Sikh professor, right? Sikh professor. He is all over Google. But that's good. Sikh professor, you Google Sikh professor, this is the story in the media right now. So you're going to win the war, you're going to win the media war first.
Where did he go?
He is from Kenya, Nairobi. And so the same week this happened to him, the Kenya attack, Nairobi attack happened in Nairobi.
I heard you were your class fellow.
We went to University of Rochester together. He spent some time in Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia. His parents now live in Indianapolis, and he lives in Harlem. Hanji?
How big is it?
Kenya and Philadelphia. I mean, I think he was quite young. You know? Please.
The whole concept of denouncing and I think that there's a big shift generationally. I mean, I think that the Sikh community, both in India and worldwide, has changed a lot. And I think that was a period that is kind of gone for Sikhs, what Rahuldeep did. I don't doubt what you say about his knowledge and sincerity, but I mean, being someone who's studied kind of nationalisms around the world and as an anthropologist, my feeling is that really the problem with the movement was that he was steeped, ironically, as much as he was steeped in Sikhi, he was steeped in the concept of nation. And I think the concept of nation is not something that the Gurus themselves really believe in. I don't think the Gurus saw the Sikhs as a nation in the modern sense. And I think...
Nation that much.
Hanji?
No, but he didn't talk about it. He said, if they want to give me, I'll take it, but he never asked for it.
But the,
That's
you
what I
know,
heard, but I don't
Vijay,
know.
I understand he may not have said it, but he was part of a movement that soon became a nationalist movement. I mean, people talked about sovereignty. If you use the word sovereignty, you know, that's a key term in nationalism. And I think that it's the logic of sovereignty that undid the logic of Sikhi.
I'm so glad you brought this up.
Oh, what is the nation for Sikh? The whole.
Right.
But-
No, I believe
Let me
way beyond. They live in a
let me provide you with an excellent Sikh myth about what sovereignty is for Sikhs. A story from Ratan Singh Pangu, Sri Guru Panth Prakash.
Finish what I want to say. The difference between Prajot's response to humiliation, to insult, to attack, which happened to him individually, but is happening to Sikhs around this country, versus Bhinder Lalaji's attack response. It's this because he is not appealing to a concept of Sikhi that is rooted in sovereignty and nationalism. He's thinking of Sikhi as truly a global, pan-human phenomenon, and in my view, I mean, I think that's what the Gurus also did. I mean, the Guru, you know, I spent time in Varanasi as a college student. I went to Patna Sahib in 1986 and 1987. And, you know, why was Guru Gobind Singh Ji in Bihar? I mean, you know, what are they doing outside of Punjab? Because they are way beyond Punjab, and they're way beyond this narrow conception of who Sikhs should be. They were already, why did Guru Nanak Dev Ji spend so much of his life away from his home and family and children to travel around the world? He was already thinking globally. I just think that, you know, and I'm not blaming him, because every community in the post-World War II period has been trapped by the concept of nation. It's empowering to some extent, but it's become very dangerous in other ways. And that's what happened to Sikhs for that 20-year period, is that they really thought this was going to save them because that was the model of the modern world. But I think it's gone. I think it's a good thing that...
I want to counter you on Sikh nationhood and what it means to Sikhs. And I started this talk saying, I hope you wouldn't be polite, and I'm glad you're not, because this is what we need, right? This is what we need. This is engagement with ourselves. Thank you for this. The Sikh nation is Sikh Qaum, right? It's not a Westphalian state. So I totally agree with you that thinking in Westphalian, European terms of nationhood is problematic. There's a really interesting myth in Ratan Singh Pangu's Sri Guru Panth Prakash, and this is after Guru period, right? Late 1700s. But Ratan Singh Pangu is saying that there's some Sikhs wrestling, and Guru Gobind Singh is so happy with them. And he says, Mango ki mangna tasi, main thoda bahut khush haan. He's talking about Anandapur period. And they said, "Nay, you know, we have everything, thank you." He said, no, ask something. And they say, "Sanu aa maja de do." ਇੱਥੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆ ਦੁਆਬ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਦੁਆਬ ਤੱਕ ਦੇ ਦਿਓ.
What is Majo?
Maja is a central Punjab between Ravi and...
It's a place.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought...
But between Maja. This is why linguistics is very important in the study of Sikhi. No, that's a different problem. But this is interesting that they say, no, we don't want any more than that. And maybe you can say they're just limiting themselves in that sense. But in another sense, what it's telling us is that Sikh notion of sovereignty is about where the Gurus walked and where about Sikh martyrs' blood was spilled, you can still have that notion and have internationalism with Sikh tradition. You can still have that and still have global tradition within Sikh tradition. These are not two binaries. I don't want to binarize these two characters.
That area is now in Pakistan.
Majah is not in Pakistan. If we look at Bari Dua,
So essentially what you're saying is,
Sikh sovereignty, where our Guru walked and where
not totally. Amritsar is the Majah.
so Rahuldeep, so where the Gurus walked is way beyond the subcontinent of India.
I agree with you.
About that.
I agree with
You
you.
expand Khalistan to cover the
Yeah,
whole Middle East.
so I tend to agree, not tend to, but I completely agree with what Sangeeta said, is that folks in that period of time, they actually ended up doing a disservice to Sikhi and marginalized it by thinking in very narrow terms. I mean, Sikhi is about breaking boundaries of the mind, of the intellect, of breaking boundaries wherever they are. And to my mind, I mean, Bhindranwala and all these people must have been very, I mean, the knowledge and everything, that's wonderful, but I cannot get past thinking that they brought weapons to her. It doesn't matter, but there was an error in judgment. And I think for us to admit that as a community, that is a mistake. I mean, talking about mistakes, to my mind, I mean, and I understand that he was a great soul and he knew much more than I would perhaps ever know. But I think it would do us good as a people, as a nation, as whatever you want to call it, to acknowledge that, you know what, that was a mistake. That should have never happened.
Minimally, we should acknowledge that by his actions, Punjab suffered at least 15 years of
And Sikhs actually became terrorists. I mean, look at the ramifications of those actions. I mean, you cannot deny that. I mean, Sangeeta referred to this colony where she went and these people were crying. I mean, was that the future that Guru Gobind Singh envisioned, Guru Nanak Sahib envisioned? They were messiahs, they were messengers of peace. So where does all of this start? I mean, a man who's charismatic, right? And then they say that he was misunderstood. These are leaders that we don't want. That we want to say that, you know what, that happened. And yes, there was a reason. And But that's not what we are about.
When we think about 1984, we always talk about all the bad things done by the Indian government.
Yes.
We don't acknowledge
Where is our
that
responsibility?
there was killing of innocent people done by Sikhs.
Yes, and we want to whitewash that. We want to put that under the rug.
was killed by them. There were so many other good people that were killed by them. Good Sikhs who were killed by some of the Khalistanis.
Well, in 91, I went to India. I'm just giving my personal. Just give me a minute or so. In 91, I went to India, right? And I was there for about 3 weeks. And I was very hesitant to go to Punjab, to be honest with you, because I don't like to die. So I didn't want to go to Punjab. I stayed mostly in Haryana and other places, and Chandigarh. And the big point was to go to Punjab and at least read in the newspaper at that time that Khalistan was nothing else except terrorism. That the Khalistani could say that they told his school principal that everybody in his school, all the women have to cover their head, right, or something like that. And eventually they killed her because she called them and said, "Oh, you are youngsters, you don't understand what's going on," and they just behave like polygons, right? So there is the fact.
We have to distance ourselves from this kind of, this brand of...
No, just I would say, no. Well, I have the mic, so I can say whatever I want. Even if you talk, you're not going to get into the camera, so that's what's going to last over there. Just like Prabjot established compassion over those youths who beat him, maybe in our community we need some compassion for those youths in that movement who felt humiliation, who felt misunderstanding, there was one news organization, a television organization in India at that time. What was the message? What was the media message of that organization? What were they up against? What were they up against? I'm not saying they didn't make mistakes. right? But to binarize this issue is exactly against what I'm talking about here.
I think we binarize to the other extent where we don't acknowledge that.
Where we don't. Okay, what is happening to Punjab today?
Poor Paji back there, he's so polite.
What is happening to Punjab today? You know what? It's destroyed.
This young man, I feel he has the wisdom. But look, you're.
I have a back-to-work camera, so 30 seconds.
You have all the power in this Gurdwara. We want to talk to somebody else.
With all unity and integrity of Muslims and everybody. Fifth Guru came to Arjun and he was...
Could you speak up just a little bit? I couldn't hear you. That won't help. It's not. It only goes to the camera.
No, that's fine. I'll say you Chauथे Padshah Guru Ramdas came. He was involved in building Darbarta along with Muslims of the time and unity, integrity, and everybody to it. Then he passed it on to Guru Arjan, fifth Guru. And by the time the politics were, the people absorbed in quite deep, as they call it. The kings of the time, people were jealous and stuff. So they called Guru Arjan and kind of, he sacrificed himself for the welfare of the people. So we went on to sixth Guru. And he decided, I see Dr. quite similar to what Arjun did, took the path. Back in the day, what I know is that from Afghanistan till like Southeast Asia, everybody was Buddhist. They're all Buddhist. People from the Middle East, the raiders came and everything, and they're like, give me this, I want the booty. Guys are like, oh, take it. It's like you don't want to stand for it, you don't have no honor. It's like, no, my religion doesn't allow it. The guy says, my religion allows it, so you're dead. You killed everybody. There are a lot of Muslims that converted, of course. So sixth Guru was more like, okay, you gotta save people. They have to give themselves up. Otherwise there would be nobody who was a human. Following a different way of life that people have distorted and kings have started. We repeated in Malik, Chave Pasha built the Kalta. He protected the Darbar Sahib with swords, with spears. People protected the religion. I'm very emotional about it. He fought wars. 4 wars he won. Guru Tegh Bahadur fought wars. Very marksman and everything. Things carried on, moved on to Guru Tegh Bahadur where he comes back and sacrifices himself again like Guru Arjan did, just from his Sodhi family. Passes on to Guru Gobind Singh. He had nothing to do. I mean, if he was like us, he would have been like, we're spiritual. They have the knowledge. They have the gun. They know what the hukum is. We don't know. It's not in our surveillance thing. We don't understand it. In order to save people and humanity, there's something. I mean, Rajgarega Khalsa, I mean, we say Khalistan. Khalistan is this body. It's purity. It's not like one nation or borders or something. It's how you interpret it. It's like Pir Tantra, what our friend from the guy with the guy, he explained it. He said India is Pir Tantra, this world is Pir Tantra, majority or minority. You have to be like us, or you're dead. We wouldn't even be able to sit there and talk about this and understand what Sikhi is, like how pure it is, what it says and how to follow it. We could have been Muslims, we could have been anybody, we could have been Buddhist or something, shaved our heads and doing something else. We would have no choice, or we didn't even have no about the gurus or what happened. So what I mean to say is the Darbar Sahib was protected by swords. People came, raiders came, they wanted to destroy it, the Sultanate came. We would have destroyed us. By Sukhar Mehtab came, and they took it over. Saying Bhindranwala's actions, modern warfare came in, politics of the time, whatever happened. He sat at the Kal Takht and his demands were kind of, they were just full, like for justice, for people's rights. But as a fellow Sikh, I can criticize him saying, why do you do this? You sit outside and do this. That was politics of the time. I don't want to get involved in that. The thing is, people who were had majority of resources, or with more people, irresponsible because at the time, a lot of things going on to destroy something.
Okay, so, Dr. Sabo, what were you?
Yeah, he took a stance. He had to take a stance. He's like, everybody's dead. They're
There's
all
no
gone.
question that the government was corrupt.
Yes,
There's no question.
I just wanted to say that
It finally gets
it's
it.
very easy to say that Punjab was put back 20 years because of what Pindrawala did. But try to imagine if he had not, and if he had basically surrendered, what your image would have been, and what your condition would have been from there on. Think about it, how many years you would have been set apart. You know, we just surrendered. If somebody attacks us, we just surrender. What your
wouldn't have
image
been
would
no
have done to
attack.
you. Okay, just I get to leave, and I just want to thank you for conducting this session. And since you are a counselor to the Jakhara movement, they feel kind of disconnected with the Gurdwara. So I want you to send a message to them about this forum, that this is actually set for them, not for us.
I will do that.
Very
Yeah,
appreciate
I will do that. Yeah.
So appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. Thank you very much. And I think let me connect it back to what I was saying earlier. Is that the leadership vacuum created in the 80s is a leadership vacuum created in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. People who couldn't get this. People who couldn't get Sikh peacemaking with effectual peacemaking. And that leadership vacuum needed to be filled somehow, and it got filled. Right? But if we want to create better leadership vacuum, or better leadership to fill that vacuum, we have to think about peace first. And there's always an option for not peace. It's always on the table. Keep it on the table. But I'm just trying to provide one way in America today that we can think about it and hope that, if Sant Fateh Singh, if Master Tara Singh had thought a little bit deeper or followed up on what they thought about so clearly, that leadership vacuum may not have been needed to fill in that way in 1980s. That's my point.
I want to bring up just one point related to all this. As the first and the last resort. We think of ourselves as a martial race.
Right.
We put weapons in front of the Gurdwaras, some in the Gurdwaras, lots of them. So we kind of put it up front, and it's supposed to be the last resort and not the first.
And we're doing such a disservice to our message. We've made it so lopsided. We view it as just a martial race. We're a peaceful race. And we're about...
No, but what
It's
does
so
it mean by
ironic.
Sant and Sipahi? Be Sant, but also be Sipahi.
Okay, so the Sipahi fight, the battlefield is of the mind. We miss that.
Gurbani has so many verses.
Interpretation changes everything, but yeah.
But
No, it
Gurbani
is.
is full of many references to weapons and war. And the imagery of weapons, even in Kabirji's Bani, but it's always the internal.
It's always the battlefield is of the
fight
mind.
against our own weaknesses. And the word Khanda comes in Gurbani so many places, and Khanda is Gyan. In Gurbani, Khanda always refers to
That which destroys
wisdom
the
and not to,
ignorance.
So you have to keep that in mind, put it in context. And certainly Sant Sipahi is very important, and the Sipahi is important, but it doesn't only mean weapons and fighting and being soldiers. And most of the Sikh martial tradition in modern times has been as mercenaries in the British Army. And we kind of, we glorify it, but we should put it in place. It was a career.
Yeah.
They were very brave, they were very good soldiers, but it was just a career, and most of them were mercenaries in a sense. They're fighting for the British, they were not defending the Sikhs, they were not defending the country or anything like that.
There's a verse in Gurbani that I don't, Vijay might remember it, but basically it talks about that I am God's wrestler. I've defeated the five So really the spiritual warrior concept is about conquering your own vices and becoming spiritual. You become spiritual by becoming a warrior too. And the battlefield is the battlefield of the mind. And this whole thing about the martial race and whipping out the sword at the drop of a hat, which is what our Gurdwaras are doing right now, Fremont being a good example of it, has done it multiple times, is really portraying the Sikh image in a way that's very detrimental to the Sikh cause. Very detrimental.
I said some of the sessions that we attended called near-death experience. It goes on the other side, come back. somebody had asked one of the persons, so what's the great religion? You know, he said, don't worry about that. God is not going to ask you what religion you are. We're a human being. I think if you are just a pure Sikh, that alone is good, but it's not easy being pure Sikh. But if you are, you're blessed. That's really, there's nothing about forming countries and all this stuff.
But that's fine.
Well, he's like, just be, you know.
But I think one thing I thought of my talk just now was that it's the other side of Antara Sifti Karanat is that, you know, being a good Sikh doesn't mean being a good Sikh in the closet.
Yeah.
There's no good Sikhs in caves.
It's like, are you good? Are you using your judgment the way it's meant to be?
And the judgment is to see the world as God wants you to see it, right? And to see the world in a way that it could be better. So just, you know, sitting, like I said, on top of the mountain, looking down on San Jose, saying, "Are we the best or what?" is fine. It's not everything.
I
You
think
know.
Guruji is very clear that
It's
your
not
spirituality has to be shown and then manifested in your actions.
And that's why you take that awe of God and you turn that into fearlessness, and you engage that in the world. If you're awed in your closet, you're in your closet. If you're awed in your, you know, in your home, and that's it, and that's all where your awe is going to go to. That's not. I don't think if we're going to talk about Guru Nanak walking the earth, he didn't walk the earth to get people awed and then just bliss out and then turn off. He would get people awed to wake them up. That's why Antara Sifti Garnath is the beginning of the Sikh engaged life. And God is engaged. If we want to be like God, be engaged in this world. That's what I see. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's all I have for you today. So thank you so much for coming and bearing with me and really engaging. That was so fun.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that.